So my name is Abram. I'm the founder for Design for Impact, and in my day-to-day job, I tend to overcommit. I'm a senior designer for Fjord, and I've been there for about a year or so. So, has anyone heard about the Cynefin framework?
Not yet for me.
Awesome. So the Cynefin framework, I was hoping someone might do their own introduction of it. Actually, Kyle, I know you know about this.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of this. You want me to run through it?
Give us a 1-2 minute spiel.
Sure. So the idea is that the systems that we're in, we typically look at everything as we're in very causal systems. It's just the way that we've managed everything for 100 years now. It's every book that we've read. It's every MBA program we've ever been to. It says that everything in our system is causal. There's direct root cause, and so there's predictability in it. What the founder of this came up with, Dave Snowden, is the idea that that's not true. Complex systems are not causal. There's unknowns in there. And so if you can discover what sort of system you're in, you can act appropriately in it. And so on the right side, this is not a typical 4-box. On the right side, you've got two types of ordered systems. An obvious system where everybody knows what you're talking about. This is, everybody knows what to do when you get to a stop sign in North America. Everybody knows how to make a cup of coffee from a Mr. Coffee machine. This is very simple systems that you can categorize exactly what you're going to do and repeat the output over and over again. And if something fails, you can identify exactly what failed. A complicated system is still very ordered, but it takes a bit of training to get to that level. So not everybody knows, but something like rocket science is actually very causal, it's very ordered, and there's math that says if this fails, we can figure out how it failed, and we can predict limits within the system. On the left side are the two unordered systems. Complex systems are entangled, and that means that it's no longer atomic. It's not that every component is its own defined piece. It means that they become super systems because they have connectivity to them. And so because of that, they're constantly in flux. The system itself, the disposition is constantly shifting. And so you can't know what it is. Think traffic. There's no one cause for traffic. And any one person that's sitting in traffic can't necessarily know what that cause might be. Cause could have been hours and hours ago, and it could have been miles away, realistically. And then chaos is something that has zero boundaries in it whatsoever. And my first instinct when I saw this for the first time was, oh, I'm in a chaotic space. We just need to move everything into that obvious space, and then it will be simple and it will be easy. Chaos is not something that persists because persistence is a boundary itself. But this is something like the first couple of days of COVID's an excellent way to look at this as a whole. When COVID hit, we didn't know anything, and we acted. We were acting in the system. By acting, we learned a few things, and we started to see the system splinter a little bit. Epidemiologists started to move into a complicated space where they said, I know how to test, I know how to release information, I know how to wear protective gear. I'm going to move into some order. The obvious space said, we're going to adapt into some patterns, but the complex space said, how are people going to adapt to lockdown? How are people going to adapt to mask mandates, vaccines, those sort of things? And that's because it's a very human complex space.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle. That was brilliant. And if this is a bit hard to understand, that's okay. If it makes you a bit uncomfortable, that's good, actually, because hopefully throughout the session, we will explain what this actually means and how it relates to complex or societal problems or the social impact that we want to create. Does anyone have any questions there before we keep going? We want to make sure people understand that there is 4 different sort of types of issues that we deal with as a society or as people. Okay, cool. Hey, Destiny. All right. So the first activity we're going to do is actually, it's going to be a bit confusing, and I think that's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to break it out into rooms. So I'm going to set 5 rooms for 6 people because we've got about 30 people today. And what I want you to do is I'll paste this in the mirror board as well. Destiny, I'll give you a link. And I want you to brainstorm some ideas in terms of what's the difference between a complex and a complicated problem. Okay, and I want you to use this table to actually talk about what that is. So this is, yeah, like I said, it's going to be uncomfortable for the first about few minutes until you get your head around it as a group and get to know each other. All right, rooms are open. So you've got about 10 minutes to start brainstorming some ideas about what are examples of complex and complicated problems. To give you a hint, complex problems are things like malnutrition. A complicated problem might be something like, how do we transport a good from this country to that country?
This kind of makes sense now.
So I have a question. So I wonder, does complex problems always include complicated problems? Is there a hierarchy for this too?
That's interesting. I don't think there is a hierarchy, but I would say because complex problems are so networked and there are so many different components at play, I think that's really interesting, yeah, because I think my gut feel is that there is some unit of a complex problem that's complicated, but to be honest, I haven't read anything about that. So that's why I love introducing complexity to people, because they take it just a completely awesome direction. Awesome. So what we might do now is we might do a quick fire round of share back, and as well an opportunity to ask questions and get other people's thoughts, and then we will break out again into rooms. I'm hearing as well that some people didn't understand what they were doing. If that's the case, just sing out. Try to be more clear for next time. Okay, I'll pick teams then. All right, let's go. Room 1. So that's Ashley, Natalie, Nicholas. Do you want to share back what some of your thoughts were?
I think we had Nicholas and our group come up with a decent complex, which was traffic in large metropolitan area like Los Angeles. And initially we started brainstorming about what Elon Musk was doing, and then we were able to drill down what the actual problem was versus what the solution is. Then the one which we were discussing when we broke off was, there were two actually. One was about river rafting and the decision to go under a waterfall and not. And the other one, we just started having a discussion when but we got to a good start. And I think a couple of us did not have access to Miro. But we had, I feel we got to a good starting understanding of complex versus complicated. Starting understanding.
Yeah, awesome. Starting to understand. That's the space we want to be. Awesome.
I think we understood pretty quickly. Yeah, we even started talking about what the interesting part of this topic. That's what we were talking about. Yeah. Does anybody else want to add something?
Awesome. Thanks, Anna.
So I think what I learned from my team was that they were trying to help me explain and understand the difference between complex and complicated problems. And we wanted to, or at least Yao actually made it, we explored the modern day problems of the vaccine distribution. So we went, okay, cool. The complicated problem is like, how do we distribute this vaccine across the world so that everyone has access to it? That's a complicated problem because you have infrastructure considerations and whatnot. But I think the part that becomes a complex problem is the reception and I guess the access to information on those side effects and what that those vaccines do for you. The second example that Terrence came up with was the Texas energy blackout. So again, same thing in the sense that the complicated problem behind that is government policy. What were the decisions made beforehand that caused that problem? And then, yeah, the complex problem behind that is like, how do we, like the climate change conversation and how do we tackle that in a sustainable way?
Wow, that's awesome. I really like your example of saying like this part of the problem is complicated and that part of the problem is complex, because I think you're right. Like delivering vaccine, I think that's really hard. And we often make the mistake of thinking just because something is really hard, it means it's complex. which is not necessarily true. So yeah, like you said, like delivering vaccines, I think that's complicated, but actually how do you, for example, nudge people to make a decision one way or the other, or how do you give them enough information and the information that they need, or how do you tackle misinformation around vaccines? I think that's definitely complicated. Awesome. Thanks, Matt. All right, room 4. So Destiny, Isabella, Karina.
Okay, I can go. We're just Destiny was talking about how complex problems are similar to a bowl of spaghetti, which I thought was a great analogy because there's so many things intertwined and working together. We definitely brought up the climate change thing. Something that I was thinking about, not too sure about, but was like complicated is like fixing a regular car that there's a very specific way to do it. And then complex is tackling the whole problem of autonomous vehicles and policy that has to go into that and creating the whole system itself, which is just pretty new and different than anything we've ever seen before. So
that's a really good example again. And I think some of the reasons why the whole autonomous vehicles thing is complex is because, for example, you like need social license in order for people to actually accept that they're driving on roads that have other autonomous vehicles, and exploring the problems around ethics and things like that. Awesome. And then finally, room 5.
We were actually discussing the AI background of what makes TikTok works, and the complex problem was that how that algorithm can figure out people's interests and serve up content that they'll get deep into and watch over and over. And then the complicated problem with that is the ethics revolving around that. Does the app have a moral obligation to facilitate information about the COVID vaccine if people are representing misinformation about it, or feeding into a person's depression and continuing to serve them up content that continues their depression? So it's, what does that need to do to both facilitate entertainment, but not cause further emotional distress?
So just to confirm, you said the AI is complex and the emotional sort of impacts are complicated?
Oh.
All right, so I would actually say the emotional sort of impacts are complex, whereas the AI is complicated, because I think like typical uses of AI actually apply to complicated problems, because there is a way to an answer of figuring out what Abram would like to listen or what will keep Abram engaged based on his previous history, basis like how Netflix shows us different covers for movies and things like that. Whereas the ethics about, should we do this thing to Abram? Should we feed into Abram's depression? Or how do we entertain Abram while not feeding into negative emotional states? I think that's the complex. Awesome. Yeah, but good work. I think they're really good examples and like real life examples, which is, does that make sense? Does everyone have some sort of handle now on the difference between complex and complicated problems? Okay, cool. If you have any questions, just shout out there. Friendly bunch of people. By the way, all right, awesome. So the next question that we're going to tackle, and I think it's working well to break out into rooms. Let me just share my screen. So I'm going to talk about some characteristics of complex adaptive systems. Okay, and I think like someone said, roads or traffic is a really good example. And one of the reasons why traffic is a good example of a complex adaptive system is that it involves a large number of interacting elements. Okay, so can anyone just unmute and tell me some of the elements in a traffic situation? And you can see some of them on the right there.
Could be the roads themselves, people's work hours, concentration of things that people would go to, sort of what kind of things are neighboring the roads.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of infrastructure, and then people's work hours and things like that. What else?
Drivers.
Yeah, direction. So the country's actual direction and laws around speed limits and what cars you can drive and who can drive them and what type of driver you are. Like if you're in Australia, you've got P platers, a certain speed limit versus full licensed drivers who can go to the speed limit. Awesome. What else?
Distracted drivers.
Yeah, distracted drivers on their phones, or telling the baby to be quiet. Yeah. What else?
Just web systems of traffic flow. So like roundabouts versus stoplights and stop signs.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan. Someone else was going to say something.
I was just gonna say the weather is a part of the
Yeah, true. If it's raining, it's maybe a bit more challenging to drive. I guess it depends on the rain. Awesome, very good. So yeah, those are exactly examples of things that make a system complex. The second thing is that the interactions are non-linear. Okay, so minor changes can produce disproportionately major consequences. So think about, for example, they put a roadblock in a major street. All of a sudden, you've got people that don't know about the roadblock that are going into that and then having to navigate, how do I get out of this? And then you've got people, for example, who know about the roadblock who are trying to almost guess what road people aren't going to take to get around it as fast as possible. And then you've got the actual roadblock workers who need to manage the signs. And then you've got the government trying to manage information. How are we going to deal with this roadblock? How are we going to tell people which ways they can go? Any other thoughts about the idea that interactions are nonlinear and that you can do something to the system and get something disproportionate back as an output? That makes sense?
Could driving experience count?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it will, like if someone knows really the road really well and they've experienced the roadblock before in that area, then they know how to deal with it, whereas someone who doesn't might not know. I think another example that sort of comes to mind, I think the mistake that Uber made around like taxi drivers and things like that is that they treated a social problem as a tech problem. So they thought about, if we create this app that allows people to, there's Uber drivers and there is this double-sided marketplace, then that's going to be great. And what they, I don't think, took into account but didn't care about, is taxi drivers and governments and how governments will accept or reject, introducing Uber into their countries. So again, Uber just introduced an app into society, but they didn't consider that there might be a big blowback coming back out of the system of drivers and passengers who don't, how do you develop trust between two people that don't know each other? Those types of things. Awesome. And then the third one, I don't know why I just like using images of cute kids. The third one is that it displays emergent behavior. Anyone got any ideas around what emergent behavior means?
The state in which the driver is.
Yeah, it depends who the driver is. What do you mean by that, Dhanashree?
Maybe he's drunk, maybe he's sad, or maybe he's in a hurry. So that indirectly reflects on the behavior he or she'll have.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That actually reminds me of Karina, your point about like intimate relationships, right? Like you might do something small and the person has a really big positive or negative reaction to it. And that's because there are factors that you didn't necessarily consider about the action that you were going to take. Yeah, what else? What are other examples of like emergent behavior? This is probably the most difficult part to understand about complex systems.
What if there is an accident and how the people in the system react to it? Like the people around. For example, there is some roadblock because of some work, or there is a procession. So these things in the like the people that are there in the system, how they'll react to it is dependent on the external factors that are there also.
Yeah, very good. I think another way to explain emergent behavior is the behavior emerges out of the whole system. Okay, so think about like when they first introduced vaccination, no one could have guessed, or we probably could have guessed to be honest, but no one would have like guessed accurately the proportion of people, for example, that really wanted to get vaccinated with a specific vaccine, the proportion of people that really didn't want to get vaccinated with a specific vaccine, and the reasons for those people, or the reasons that those people had. And then you've got, lots of groups sitting in the middle, or lots of groups thinking it's a government hoax or things like that. Again, the behavior that you get back from the system, right? If we're focused on tackling an issue like say malnutrition, the behavior that you get from the system is not something that you can necessarily guess, okay? Because it comes out of the whole system as opposed to trying to guess. This is how drunk people react. This is how non-drunk people react. This is how experienced drivers react versus non-experienced. So it's very difficult, almost impossible to try to guess exactly what how the system will behave in response to you trying to change it. Does that make any sort of sense to anyone? I'm getting some nod.
Add a little something flavor to that if I can. Fascinating thing that I've been discovering and digging into on this is that there's an adjacent piece of this where complex adaptive systems also have memory. So think about the first time you went to the airport that you go to regularly, or the first time you drove your commute to work. You read all the signs, you were very alert in that pattern, discovering it, but you learned life hacks and tricks, and your sort of cognitive activation has gone down. First time I went through Atlanta airport, I probably read all the signs. I got lost 2 or 3 times. I didn't know where I was going. I had to leave things at TSA because I brought too much nonsense in my bag, whatever it was. But when I became a regular traveler and I had to go through Atlanta regularly because Richmond doesn't have a great base flight-wise, I knew that airport like the back of my hand. And my patterns changed. That's the emergent behavior. So they're adjacent, but it basically says that as you start learning the system, then you will adapt to new patterns. So I bought different things to support my trips. I went different places. I made my plans differently about, I'm going to grab lunch at this place because I want to check this out, or I like this, or I know not to go on a Monday morning because that's when all these other people are going to be there. So I adapted into those patterns, but this was me personally. I probably caught on to those. I would also do things like maybe read a Reddit board or something like that, and I would catch on to other people's life hacks, and those have pretty community impact. And so I'm not the only one. There is a flow to that.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Val. I completely understand your point about actually we adapt to different complex systems by trying to understand them and actually adapting our behavior to suit, which is a lot of what happens in complex systems. All right. So here's the next question. So the big question is, why does complexity matter? So we'll go again into breakout rooms, and we want to hear from you. Why do you think complexity matters to you, to your work, to the impact that you want to have? Any questions about that? And again, put your thoughts down into the Miro board and we'll share back when we come back. All right. Cool. If you have any questions, just unmute and ask or send a message in the chat. Awesome. Thanks for coming back, everyone. So I won't call out groups again. I think we know what to do. But it'll be good to hear from a few people around why complexity matters. So feel free to just unmute and share. Emma.
Yeah, sure. We've actually have really nice discussion regarding this problem, and I can't remember every single one, but my answer to this is that complexity makes life interesting and encourage people to explore a lot of more different kind of opportunities and boost creativities. And that's how we can see we can make a lot of different interesting things into this world.
Wow. I love that answer. That's awesome. I like that you went to the positive side of complexity, like what emerges out of complexity. That's awesome. All right, let's go to Karina.
We talked about how life itself is complex, and so that's clearly why complexity matters, acknowledging that, but also something that I mentioned was that acknowledging the complexity of certain issues and problems encourages and promotes diversity of thought and culture and welcomes like kind of ideas like cognitive dissonance, where if new behavior is emerging and because the result is not predictable, we can't really think as we usually would. And so that kind of requires us to step out of our comfort zone and to look at things in a different perspective, or just even encourage people from different cultures or even from different spaces to really speak. I think we see that in a lot with within accessibility. And yeah,
absolutely. I love that you spoke about it. it almost confronts us, like reality confronts us, in terms of we try to do X and then we get Y, and we have to deal with why is it that we got, what could we do different to try to achieve the goal that we do want to achieve. So that's awesome. I think Kyle, you were clapping as well. All right, awesome. Does anyone else want to share? Maybe a third person? Just unmute and speak. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so I was saying that it matters because the type of impact that is delivered depends on it. Like we were saying, you can't undo complexity, but you can iterate with complicated problems. So it depends on which one you want to pay for, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting that like you can't just untangle it and break it down so much that suddenly you understand everything about it. No, it's still complex, and you still have to iterate your way through solutions and use different experiments. Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks for that. So let's get that. So any thoughts around how we can understand complex systems? I think we gave a few hints. I think there have been a few hints in what people shared back as well, but any thoughts around how we can begin to understand complex systems? All right, cool. So I think there's two ways that often get used. The first one is just engaging with the complex system. So if you want to fix traffic, what you do is, or you want to tackle malnutrition or something like that, what you do is you try to understand the system, and you try to understand the system by engaging with it, right? So you talk to people who experience the system, you talk to people in government and other organizations, you talk to people with lived experience, and then you try to create some experiments that you think might shift the system to the goal that you want to achieve. So for example, one project I worked on was malnutrition in Nepal. And for that, what we tried to do was we actually had Nepalese researchers go into the different towns and talk to parents about malnutrition and understand their perspectives on that. And then we ran a few experiments, right? We introduced these fortified foods and ran experiments around, would parents even want this thing? How would they find out about it? Would they pay for it, and how much? So one of the things that we can do to help us begin understanding the system as we engage with it is visualizing the system. Okay, and you can see some sort of different ways, like top right. I think that was a couple of years ago, like when there were no lockdowns and we actually had in-person workshops, and actually using like Lego pieces and things like that to create a visual representation of the system. But we can also do that just as effectively, I think, virtually and a bit more inclusively, I would say. So you can see other examples of different maps that we can do. So for the last about 15, 20 minutes together, that's what we're going to try to do. So I'll introduce you to two concepts. First one is the idea of a stock, and the second one is the idea of a flow. So a stock is basically something tangible that increases or decreases, okay? And a flow is basically something, the relationship between two different things that increase or decrease that thing. I'll give you examples because I think it's hard to understand in an abstract way. So for example, if I'm looking at my savings account, I can look at my savings as a stock. Okay, so the more savings I have, and then the other stock is interest, right? So I can look at interest in terms of like percentage. So the more savings I have in the bank, the more interest money I get back, but also the higher the interest rate, the more money I save. Okay, does that make sense? So you've got a positive relationship, it's reinforcing, right? The more your money, this is like pretty simplified. I think you'll create much more complex ones. The second issue is the relationship between food, energy, and exercise. Okay, and we can look at, say, food. The more food I eat, the more energy I have. For some people, the more energy they have, the more they exercise. Some people, the more energy they have, the less they exercise. And we can also look at the relationship, say, between exercise and energy, and say the more we exercise, the less energy we have. Okay, so you've got a balancing loop, it's called, but we'll discuss that later. And then same thing. With the less energy I have, the more I want to eat. Okay, so there's a negative relationship there. Does that make sense so far? So the idea between stocks and flows. Any questions? All right, so the last activity we're going to do together is I want you to pick either one of these activities, or you can create your own activity around learning a new skill, falling in love, conflict, or making an investment. And I want you to map. We want you to map what the different stocks and flows are. And I've created a board for each team to do that on Miro. Any questions before we break out for one last time? All right, cool. So you've got 10 minutes for this, and then we'll close out together. I saw a few people scrambling there last minute. I think there's still a few people scrambling. It's okay. Don't worry about it. You don't have to. You don't have to finish the map or anything. That's not the aim of the exercise. Should have said that at the beginning. Awesome. Dan, still writing. One time I was doing an exam, and the teacher said pens down, and pens down means like that's it, like you're out of time. And I kept writing anyway, and that was the only time I got caught for cheating. Other times I cheated, I just didn't get caught. All right, awesome. So yeah, keen to hear reflections about that exercise. And what did you find easy? What did you find difficult? What did you find interesting or different than things that you've learned before? And again, I'll try not to call out names. Please just unmute and share your perspectives. Keen to hear. I have to call out names, don't I? All right, Lindsay.
Learning a skill, and we specifically wanted to use learning to ride a bike as our like skill to like help guide us. And I think the most difficult thing was we were diving very deep into the minutia of just every little detail. What caused you to want to learn to ride a bike? Was it awareness? Was it inspiration? Did you have to form a plan? How did you form your plan? And I think that was like the trickiest thing for my group.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, next week we're going to talk about boundaries in a system, and boundaries help you set, okay, we're not going to talk about what caused me to want to ride a bike. We're just going to talk about the actual skill of learning a bike, and that's it. But boundaries are pretty helpful when visualizing complex systems. So, common problem. Awesome. Let's take someone. Elena.
Oh, hi. Yeah. We were together with Lindsay, so I can relate pretty much to everything what you said. Yeah, but it's good to learn that you just said right now about the boundaries. And I think it will be an immense help, simply because you can just dive in so deep and trying to outline every single detail. But yeah, learning a new skill, once you said it, now I have not completely, but slightly different plan how I would go about describing it.
Awesome. Sounds good. And then, Des, do you want to share? Or Vicky?
Yeah, so our group did like making an investment, and then I think like one of the difficulties is because we thought it would be simple because we're talking about the stock market, and it seems very simple. Like you put in money, and then depending on how the market does, then you get it back, and then you gotta grow or whatever. Right? But there was a lot of complexity in it. Just there's so many external factors, and we just kept, again, like what Lindsay said, kept digging into some of the details, some time, regulations, weather, and then again, we also talked a lot about why people might start making investment too, like they're spending, maybe start understanding at the market. So there was just so many minor details and then we weren't sure how to lay it all out in the end.
Yeah. I can see the perfectionists in our group who are still working away. Yeah, it's interesting to see the different personalities and how people engage with this tool of mapping. Something that, like Vicky, something that seems simple, but when you drill down into it, there's a lot of different components. All right. So one thing I want to end with is that these types of approaches actually get applied to real problems, not just thinking about things like learning a skill or making an investment. So there's a few examples that I've referenced as well in the slide deck around problems like childhood obesity and malnutrition and things like that, where people have actually applied these approaches. And people like Kyle, Dan, and I actually apply these approaches day to day to understand and engage and make change. Even though I think today was like an introduction, these skills are actually really helpful when you're thinking about issues like malnutrition in Nepal or funding for an international NGO. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to engage with a complex adaptive system. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about things like boundaries, and we're going to get some more practice in terms of actually visualizing complex systems. So if you enjoy today, it would be awesome to have you. And this session is actually part of our course around taming complexity, or the fundamentals of change making and complexity. So if you want to join a team and over the next 4 or 5 weeks get to work on a problem that you're passionate about together, then you can sign up. The link as well is in the Miro board, so you can access it there. And yeah, just to close out, it'd be good to get everyone's feedback around how they thought the session, especially for people who joined new, whose first time it is here, and yeah, what we could improve. Does anyone have any thoughts on that before we close out?
I really enjoyed this session. I found out about the Slack group, I think a couple of days ago. And I didn't actually know that this event was happening until I saw your Slack message. And then I had to look it up. So if there's, I don't know how we are informed of these events, but it would have been nice to know earlier ahead of time. But I really enjoyed this, and I liked how interactive this was.
Awesome. So I just posted 2 links in the chat. One is for the course if you want to sign up. The other one is just for our community. So once you sign up there, you'll get links to our Slack community, and we'll send you our events as well ahead of time. So hopefully you can put it in your calendar. It doesn't clash with too many things. But thanks, Vicky. Any other thoughts? We have one final thing that we'd like to do. Yeah, go.
Yeah, I had a request because I was very new and I did not know how the Miro board worked. So maybe for newer people, you can provide a little bit more explanation, because I was lost until I found this yellow circle that, okay, we're here. Okay, now I got it, because there's just too many boards. Thank you.
Yeah, cool, awesome. We will make sure we do a quick intro of Miro next time. Thanks, Elena. Any final thoughts? All right, feel free to drop your feedback in Miro. We change every session basically based on your feedback. All right, awesome, that was a good one. All right, thanks so much, everyone. It's good to see your faces at the end. And yeah, if you have any questions, just reach out to us on Slack. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you next week.